centro de la pampa vive un pimiento. Sol y viento pa' su vida, sol y viento. Sol y viento.
Hello, I'm Patrick Barnard. Welcome to the 53rd edition of the Pimento Report. This is a little bit of a getaway from the crude manipulation of Monsieur Jean Charest, from the cheap shabbiness of the government of Stephen Harper. And funnily enough, I've decided to get away from Stephen Harper by coming right to Edmonton, Alberta. This is a place that I visit occasionally. Do I know it really well? Do tourists know places well? This is a city that I really like. I've watched it changed over the last few years, and I also visit Saskatchewan during the summer. So this is a little photo album of the summer of 2012. We're walking along 144th Avenue Northwest in Edmonton. This city is a vast sprawl of suburbs dominated by car traffic ever since the post-World War II boom and expansion. Edmonton has one of the lowest urban population densities in Canada. But Redmonton, as it's sometimes been called, also has a counter-tradition to this sprawl, a tradition of urban planning, and it has more green space per capita than Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, though much less than Calgary, Alberta. The light in Edmonton is beautiful, sharp and bright, almost like the Mediterranean. Here's the side paneling of a bungalow on a regular street, just a regular house, regular street, but the light is very sharp. And this northern clarity makes a visitor see the city's contradictions, the very wealthy and the significant number of marginal people, the business dealers downtown and the working class. And working Edmontonians are the people who take the mass transit. Since I'm a non-driver, I have walked and ridden in this city winter and summer. And these Edmonton bus rides that I give myself as a sort of solitary treat are like Walt Whitman's trips on the Brooklyn Ferry. They throw me into a sort of meditation. Bus riding makes me think how in 1967, 1968, I came to Canada from New York City to protest and evade the American empire. People in Alberta and Saskatchewan back then were very kind to me. I'm standing here in 97th Street in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm about to go downtown. Almost 45 years after I first saw these areas of the world, hitchhiking across Canada in that summer of 1968, the summer of the Chicago Convention. And the assassination of Robert Kennedy.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
Let's go downtown in Edmonton, Alberta, 2012. A few winters ago, I was riding this same route, the number 9 bus, in the middle of North America, reading a late bad novel of the French novelist Alain Robbe-Grillet. And it struck me then how the gritty side of everyday Edmonton life had more truth and even art to it than Robbe-Grillet at his worst. And now I'm doing it again, reading a novel in French, riding around Edmonton. This time the book is called Folle, Madwoman, by Montreal's Nelly Arcon. Nelly Arcon is dead now, by her own hand, but her book is very alive with its tragic vision of the cruelty of desire and the impossibility of love. Nelly Arcon and Edmonton, Quebec and Alberta. There doesn't seem to be much connection, but maybe there is. Perhaps in Edmonton's cycles of boom and bust, creation and destruction. Street busker Brian Gregg, playing at the corner of 100th and 103rd, downtown in front of the fountains at Winston Churchill Square. Gregg is wearing a red square on his left side. He says, "I am wearing the red square in solidarity with the students of Quebec. I think education should be free." Downtown is Brian Gregg's beat, and there's now a concerted effort among citizens and planners to strengthen Edmonton's core. So in downtown, you see a fascinating mixture of new and old buildings. Scotia Bank and the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. The Manulife Building and the old Union Bank, now restored as a hotel. The McLeod Building, amid all the business of new downtown.
Here you have the sound of Edmonton 2012. That's a jackhammer in the background. I'm right in front of the McLeod Building, across the street. Probably the finest building in all of Edmonton.
To my eyes, the McLeod Building is really beautiful. But it was almost lost to downtown development until a local architect stepped in, put up his own money, and preserved it by converting it to condos. The color of the stone, the facade, the entrance, and the frieze at the very top all show the influence of the Chicago architect Louis Sullivan, as one can see by contrasting the McLeod in Edmonton to Sullivan's famous Guarantee Building in Buffalo, New York. The Art Gallery of Alberta, right near these fountains downtown, has a wonderful small book in its bookstore about architecture in Edmonton from 1940 to 1969. The book is called Capital Modern, with beautiful photos by James Dow. And the first essay by critic and curator Trevor Body really captures the essence of Edmonton, I think. Body stresses 4 influences on the city. 1. Geographic isolation at the edge of empire. 2. Economic cycles of boom and bust. 3. The 2 impulses of capitalism and communitarianism. And 4. Northernness, what's called in Quebec, nordicité. Body writes at the end of this small book a devastating postscript in which he says that every one of his favorite modernist buildings in Edmonton has, in his words, quote, either been demolished or compromised out of recognition, unquote. Body, born and raised in the city, insists that Edmonton, in his words, stands out for conspicuously destroying its finest architecture, of leveling the best and leaving the worst. In my view, he adds, this is not an accident, but a manifestation of its boomtown mentality. 2 buildings in today's downtown are notable here. City Hall and the new Alberta Gallery of Art designed by the architect Randall Stout. And interestingly, these 2 very structures have absorbed 2 of the modernist buildings that Body most liked and most laments. Here is the winding staircase of the art gallery, with its manifold glimpses of the city outside. Since I never knew the previous Edmonton art gallery that Body liked so much, I have no sense of loss as I wander through the present building, just as people in a boom never remember a bust.
Here I am in front of the McDonald Hotel in downtown Edmonton. The sound of the jackhammers has gone away. This is one of the great railway hotels of Canada. But for about 8 years in the 1980s, until 1991, it almost looked as if this hotel would disappear.
The McDonald Hotel almost disappeared, but is now part of the Fairmont Hotel chain. Boom and then bust in the late 1980s nearly killed this building. Now, when a visitor goes downstairs to the washrooms in the inside of the hotel, there on the walls are hidden reminders of the biggest crash of them all, the Great Depression between 1929 and 1939, that really hit the city hard. On the wall of the narrow hotel staircase, there's a series of paintings by Mary Topping entitled The Depression. Now nobody quite remembers the Depression, because modern Alberta, for example, began in 1947 with the discovery of well number 1 in a place called Leduc. In 1947, though, we've got to remember, there were still functioning coal mines in Edmonton. We can look back now to pictures from 1929 of the different social classes in the city and think about how the story of boom and bust isn't just an Alberta tale. It's a Canadian chronicle of how we have exploited nature and each other to procure our wealth. Ironically, in 2012, the source of plenty in Canada still appears to be the land itself in this age of apparently insatiable demand for raw materials. Under all the cities of the plains, the skyscrapers, the money, lies the land. You're looking here at a type of deep, humus-rich soil known as black earth. Edmonton lies astride one of the world's famous belts of such land. What is known as the Palliser Triangle in Saskatchewan and Alberta includes Edmonton's black earth belt at the top of the crescent on this map. One Edmontonian descendant of farmer settlers told me, "The soil is rich here, black earth, and you know we are very young, only 100 years. Land in Canada. Right up to today, questions of territory really underlie the tensions between French, English, and the First Nations and everyone else who's followed. The other place I visited in the summer of 2012 is in Saskatchewan. It's a place called Murray Lake to the north of North Battleford, on a section of topography known as the Missouri-Coteau Plateau. Saskatchewan here represents something much older than 100 years, and the visible natural history goes back millennia. First, there was the retreat of the glaciers, more than 100 centuries ago. The plateau of the Missouri-Coteau dates from this period, and the ice melting scraped the land from southeastern the Dakotas up to the northwest. Then there were the buffalo and the people who hunted them. Finally, European settlers came, and the buffalo were hunted to near extinction. There was settlement, conflict, and the infamous Treaty No. 6 that placed the indigenous peoples in this place on reserves. Big Bear from Saskatchewan was one of the leaders who refused to sign Treaty No. 6. The issue back then was government surveying, land appropriation, and then its mode of distribution to the newcomers. Here's an excerpt from a 1976 film called Big Bear, directed by Gil Cardinal and based on a novel by the writer Rudy Wiebe. The novel was called The Temptations of Big Bear. The movie has an interesting linguistic reversal. The Europeans speak the language of the other, and the indigenous people communicate in English, so the audience will feel closer to native than newcomer.
I am Big Bear, chief of the people who live here. Our hunters found those whites measuring land. Who said they could do that?
Wacham Big Bear, kling de mashtumel de wan nu. Warama found de wit, wyatt, wallow, quam dit dorentum.
Wacham Crozier, Massa Kling de Rudnu. Government deet dies upash mayet. Ruch stange fee government. Mayet wallow.
He says, I am Crozier, big chief of all police here. Government say these men survey for government. Stick up poles for government. Measure land.
Peter Erasmus, I have met you, so I name you. Tell this first redcoat Crozier We have never met government, and we have never met you. Tell them, land is for buffalo, not measuring.
Oh.
Urgun memo type government. The urgun memo type duke. Wallow bulling. Nemel mayet.
Here you see one of the geodesic triangulation markers once used for surveying on top of a height of land overlooking Murray Lake. The land has been sectioned, but it still retains its epic, abiding quality.